get one, but get one. There is a book here. Now, it is very important that everybody signs the book with their full name, date of birth, address, tax file numbers, anything we can use to identify you and create an identity later would be most grateful. This wasn't cheap, so we're all going to chip in. But on a serious note, please make sure you fill it out. That's a request from Roz. I would also like to give a special mention and thank you to those people that travelled a long way today. I know we've got people from Cairns and South Australia and so forth. Even if you just came from across the bridge, thank you for making the effort to come here. But those that came a particular distance, thank you. It's noted and it's not gone unappreciated, so thank you very much for that. So with that said, I'll make a start on the eulogies. And if you're up for it, there's no pressure, but just get your mind thinking about it. I'll afford some time at the end for an open mic if you want to come up and say how much you admire David or how much you miss him, that sort of thing. There's no pressure to do it, but if you want to share your thoughts, you're welcome to. So, hands up, who knew David before he met Roz? Exactly, he was an enigma. As far as we know, he was a secret agent. David was born on the 29th of August 1947 to parents Doreen and Arthur Brown. He was the last of 3 children and the only boy, and each had a 5-year age gap. David spent most of his early formative years on Frost Street in Earlwood, an inner western Sydney suburb, which now has a median house price of $1.3 million. So opportunity gone wasted there for sure. At age 14, David dropped out of school to pursue a fitting and machinist, or what we call fitting and turning trade. He later expanded this to welding. While he was at his apprenticeship in the 1960s, he also studied art at Sydney TAFE. And when we do the video later, you'll see some of his artwork and creative exploits later. He is to be considered one of the lucky ones, having met the love of his life, Rosalind, at only age 19. The two were married on the 4th of March 1972. After being married, resources were tight. Ros and David spent their new years living with his parents in Earlwood until they purchased their first apartment in Mortdale. In 1976, they welcomed their first child, Daniel, and before too long made the move across Georges River to Padstow Heights. In 1978, they welcomed their second, and according to Kate, the most favourite child into the family. In 1983, David moved his family to Canberra for a year. And if anyone's been to Canberra, you know 12 months is more than enough. So at the end of that 12-month period, they made the move back to Sydney, this time to Bexley South. I'm someone that spent 21 years in Canberra for the record, just so it shows. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And when they moved to Bexley South, they moved to what's called the news agency, referred to as the Shop. Like many in the late 90s, late 80s, including my own parents, they felt the pinch of the housing market in Sydney with soaring interest rates, and David moved his family to Western Australia. The move wasn't straightforward, but David never gave up his dream to provide everything he possibly could for his family. While working a full-time job, he would spend every waking second of the next few months building a kit home. This time was extremely exhausting and trying, and despite traipsing to the shower and toilet block for nearly a year, the children remembered David was always there for them, did everything he could to make life fun. In 1990, the house was finished, and despite no flooring, skirting boards and sheets for curtains, it became the Brown family home. With David no longer distracted by working on the house, he set about making it a place that they could call home, and fulfilling his dream to start making it for the family. Over the next few years, the kit home would be added with a pool, an aviary, a chook and duck pen, and it was during these years that David's passion for animal rescue was started. They acquired a wayward sheep, who became best friends with the Dalmatian Cara, and they had a hand-reared turkey which lived with the ducks and chickens. In 2001, Ros and David moved to Brisbane, leaving Daniel behind, and Kate was already settled in Canberra, where she remains today, so good for her after all that time. From this time forward in 2001, David and Ros set about building their own reputation as the social epicentre in Brisbane, always welcoming people to their house and assisting with charities and organising dinners here at the Norman. David is fondly remembered by us all for his incredible artistic and being a perfectionist. He loved his jazz, he loved his family, and he was the type of go-getter who would burn the candle at both ends. He took a no-bullshit approach to life. If the sun was up and you weren't doing something, you were wasting daylight. He was always happy to spend his time helping others. He maintained this active approach during his final years and didn't give up until he exhausted all treatment options. Even during the tough times of treatment, he kept his sense of humour, as will be evident by some of the photos we see later, and even during his final weeks was still referred to as the old cheeky David we all remember. David didn't waste a minute of his 72 years here on earth. The world is truly a better place for having him in it, as is reflected by this turnout today, so thank you all for being here. And today is somewhat dimmer now that he has passed. We are grateful for the opportunity to have known him, and in the words of David himself, suck it up, princess, no one gets out of this thing alive. I would now like to read a letter from Doreen, who was a very, very good friend of David. She can't be here today, and so instead has sent these words. I'm devastated I can't be with you today. If David had just let me know before absconding, I never would have booked flights to Tasmania, as I'm not accustomed to missing out on free drinks. Ros, David and I go back a long way. Let's just say a few decades. Do you want to say how many?
40.
Decades? 4 or 5 decades, not 40 or 50 decades. I was certainly present at their wedding, and when I first recognised David as a very cool dude in his red velvet wedding attire, they made for a beautiful couple. At this stage, I'll have to admit, I'd always been quite envious of my dear Aussie friend's marriage to David. I mean, she should get an amazing guy who could turn his hand to anything and do it with such precision, artistry and style. For David, everything just had to be perfect. 99.9% was not good enough. Meanwhile, there's me stuck in the original guy with, how many kiwis does it take to change a light bulb joke? Now that isn't fair, is it? David was a fairly quiet, laid-back sort of guy, with a dry wit and humane heart. Providing he didn't mention anything on the right side of politics, David, he loved his animals, most particularly Mr. Ed, who was the luckiest foster dog alive, and Franco. His plants, his beautiful tree orchards, and the environment, all his prized native shrubs, that made him stand out among men. Whoops, that's sexist, not allowed to say that, but he was amongst the throngs. He epitomised all words that are very much missing in today's world. Humility, modesty, honesty, respect, integrity. David and Ros's respect for each other enabled them to retain their individuality as they had total trust in each other. So much so that they never became that old married couple. However, when they set their minds to it, they could definitely do the odd couple thing very well. Apart from his left-wing politics, David's other passion in life was his children, Kate and Daniel. And to them I would say you two are very lucky to have such a wonderful role models in your life. Some things so many children miss out on in today's topsy-turvy world. And finally, to my dear friend Ros, I know life is going to be harder for you in the future, having lost your soulmate, but I also know that you have the capacity to keep going on, knowing that you never for 1 second let David down. You were there for him right to the end, regardless of the toll it took on yourself. To David, my life was all the richer for your wit and wise counsel, and I cherish your memory as I know everyone else will who knew you. Goodbye, dear friend. Love, Doreen. Thank you. In saying that, I'd now like to invite Ros, David's wife, up to say a few words. Thank you.
Don't get shocked because there's 4 pages. I did it in really big print. So I wouldn't have to put my glasses on, but I can't find where's page 1.
So not big enough,
I'm not sure where to start. Thank you all. Thank
don't want to hear your voice.
I'm not sure where to start. Thank you all for coming. David will be blown away, amazed to know that there were so many people who wish him well. We met when I was 17 and David was 19, and a few months later, David was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. A lady I worked with, not really a lady, said, "You'd better get rid of him. You don't want to be saddled with that all your life." Time has shown that there was never a time that David ever used his illness as an excuse for not doing things, and I never felt saddled. In fact, it seemed to stir him on to do whatever others thought he couldn't or shouldn't do. He travelled the world through many time zones and always worked out his insulin requirements quietly and efficiently. His white coffee, 2 sugars, changed to black coffee, no sugar, on day 1 of the diagnosis. As he said, there was no point in being silly, it was what needed to happen. He worked at many jobs: fitter, machinist, welder, salesman, newsagent, apple packer, contractor, handyman and school groundsman, and never had a day's illness due to his diabetes, and rarely had any time off with any other illness. I remember one time he took a half day off, the first in 8 years of one job, and that was to go to someone else's funeral. His work ethic was fierce, and a sickie just wasn't in his vocabulary, something he passed on to his 2 children, who he loves to bits, Daniel and Kate. David was also such an artistic man, as Tim's mentioned, never earning a living from his crafts, but able to leave behind some beautiful handmade objects and pictures of his work. He had aviaries and marine aquariums, he made lead-light windows and stained glass light catches, welded butterflies and welded a hornet for Daniel. He renewed a bench seat with etching, built retaining walls in the garden and created a beautiful Japanese garden outside our bedroom where he often sat with Ed and had, page 3, I'll draw a breath. He painted, worked with wood, steel and many other raw materials, and there was rarely a time where if he wanted something done around the house he couldn't find a way to do it himself. He was my support through months and years of severe depression and agoraphobia, helping me to return to the outside home, driving me to and from work in the beginning and egging me on when I said I couldn't do something. When I did achieve, he'd just say, "I knew you could do it." He never tired of me asking him to help what to him were total strangers, and he would jump in his ute and drive to help others without a second thought. When he was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer, he said, "I thought I'd had my cross to bear," and then he just got on with it. He was, as always, with a laugh and a smile, never complaining despite the more than 2 years of awful treatments, pain, fatigue, nausea. Guys, get your prostates checked, okay? My relatives once said the Browns came from good stock, and I know what they meant. David said before he died that he had no regrets, he'd had a good life, and he'd done it with me, the love of his life. He'd just have liked another 10 years. Towards the end, I think I still managed to stay 1 step ahead of 2 of his other loves, Ed, the wonder dog, and Bunnings. David's only concern nearing the end was for me and the kids. As he said, we were the ones who had to keep going. He'd be okay because he'd be gone and he wouldn't know anything about it. He was a humble, lovely, sensible, funny, quirky man, and I'll miss him and love him for the rest of my life.
I'd now like to bring Kate up to say a few words, and I'll stand here with her just in case I've got to tag in.
I'm not going to make eye contact because that's going to be bad. So, anyone who knows me knows how much my dad means to me. I have been so warmed and comforted by the many messages and calls I've received over the past few weeks, particularly from my amazing friends. With all of these messages mentioning how much Dad meant to me and talking about the bond we had. As hard as it's been, receiving those messages has helped. Many of those friends are here today, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. There are no words, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you. As is clearly a common theme here today, the world was a better place with Dad in it. Not least because he was a left-wing, animal-loving, environmentalist Labour voter. I am proud. I remember Dad telling me how proud he was to have been part of the over 90% of Australians who voted in the 1967 referendum, while also saying that it never should have been needed and that a lot more needed to be done. He wasn't wrong then or now. Unfortunately, my first time voting in a referendum, the 1999 Republic referendum, was not so positive an experience for me. I am still hoping for another shot at that one. My dad was a good person. Kind, generous, caring, the strongest and hardest working person I know. As has been mentioned, he was also gifted, a talented artist in so many ways, metal, art, glass, you name it, he could do it. I'm lucky to have many reminders of him in all these forms. My world was definitely better with him in it. Not only because of all the dad jobs and labours of love that he carried out for me, but for so much more. I know how lucky I am to have had a dad as good as mine. It's a rare thing in this world to be loved unconditionally, and I had that, and it's something that I cherish and will carry with me always.
Thank you, Kate. Now, in preparing for this, David always said that there's one person he wanted here today, and that the only way to guarantee he'd be here is to make him say a speech. So, I'd like to invite Dennis up to say a few words, please. And I can guarantee that we're going to see more of Dennis than we really want to later on, but for now,
Yes, Dennis Brown's the name, no relation. Did someone say thank Christ, or was it just? But a friend for over 45 years. I have two sisters, I've got a twin and an older sister. David was as close to a brother as I ever had. For those 45 years we worked together in sales for many years. Then we had music agency business at the same time, so we would share problems, etc. And generally we had lots in common. In all that time, there was rarely a harsh word spoken between us. Again, it helped that we leant the same way politically. David was a solid union. If ever I wanted to poke there, I'd just say those union bludgers and we were away. David was immensely hard working, as you already know, but fervently loyal, clever, funny. He had a great sense of humour. Not many people could start a conversation with. Want a rip? David could, and did. Got away with it. That's the truth, Ross. I would often refer to him as Dave, Digger or Dig. He would call me Brownie, Digger or Dig. Sometimes called me stupid, dickhead. No kids here? That never caused a problem between us. Dave, again, kids have spoken about this, but Dave was mostly a homebody who liked nothing more than having a project. Something to build or mend around the house. He was extremely clever with anything that required a hand in tool. No pun intended. However, here I'll certainly extend on that, but anyway. And he had every drill saw. I think Wayne's going to talk about his shed, so I won't go into that. I can recall one time he had a water flooding problem at the back of the house. This is in Brisbane. Not only did he fix the problem perfectly, he decided he then needed to build a deck over the area, which he did. That escalated into the addition of the well-researched, authentic Japanese garden, complete with bonsai plants, a new hothouse to grow and nurture his numerous plants and orchids. He always had a project on the go, be it red light windows or bird boxes or tropical fish. Whatever he turned his hand to had to be authentic. Near enough was never good enough for Dave. And it was a trait we loved and admired him for. He had a magnificent fish tank in the living room. Most of you have probably seen it, with exotic tropical fish, live coral, plants, handmade seascapes, which he made himself. And he built them from scratch. Something that rattled was there was another room dedicated to supporting the front room showpiece. This house included more fish tanks, more fish food, plants, coral in different growth periods, and there was a whole room dedicated to just the front fish tank. Such was Dave's determination, dedication and attention to detail. I've got a couple of memories here that I just want to share with you. I had to run past Ross. He said, yeah, they're right. Among Dave's many talents, he was able to break wind without notice. And those dirty little big boys would sometimes compete in this area, something usually reserved for our own fun. I'm not saying that he would wander around the place partying. I was there. One time we used to play snooker on Monday night as a bunch of us. We used to play snooker. I can do this without the notes, I remember it so well. It's very embarrassing. We used to play snooker on Monday night. It was a group. This particular Monday night, there were only two of us, and I said to Dave, you going to come and play snooker? He said, yeah, okay. So it was at the Maroubra Seals Club. And next to the Seals, there was a tiny little terrace house that they owned, and at some stage they were going to demolish it, which they did eventually. But it was a very no-frills little restaurant. You went in there, there was about half a dozen tables, 2s and 4s. You went in, the menu was soup, steak and vegetables, chicken and vegetables, apple pie. That was it. That was your choice. And we went in there and you went and got your soup. You had your soup, and then you put your soup in a little bucket thing, so you did everything yourself. So we were in the first two tables as you walk in. First single table, there was Dave and I. Dave was looking back at me, and I was looking into the restaurant. And there was about 4 or 5 tables. And I thought maybe I might join the farting competition with Dave. So I leaned forward and I lifted the cheek and Dave, this could be interesting. Anyway, there was a fair bit more wind than I anticipated. Might have been the soup, and the plastic chair didn't help. Anyway, it went off like a bomb. I was horrified. Dave was horrified. Both were both even more horrified when the fellow behind said, "Shit, did you hear that?" And that really got us going. So you never laugh so much. You can't laugh out loud. I was shrinking, trying to become very small, hiding behind David, and trying to shrink so that you're not looking at anyone, in case they think it was you, which it was. And then, anyway, we got through that, and we had our meal, and the table behind us were walking out. One of the guys said to me, a couple of blokes with their lady friends, he said to me, "Can't take him anywhere, can you, mate?" And I said, "No." Another time we holidayed together in Fiji. This was Dave and Ross and Chris and I, and he was still in this tropical fish thing that was going through. So of course Dave had to have the underwater camera to record everything. He would get very excited about the sea life he saw, boring. One day he was taking a shot underwater. He was getting this particular, he used to grow his own coral, right? Grow. Very excited about this particular bit of coral. And as he was lining up to take the shot, I dropped the cozzies and floated in between about the ankles and floated, showing a large white baton. David Koss, of course, took the shot. Shortly after, Dave thought the camera had sprung a leak and was concerned that it may have damaged the photos. Some of you know this one, don't you? So he took the camera shop to be prepared. You're not going, we got a phone call a couple of days later, it was Ross. "You're not going to believe this," she said, laughing, hysterical. And I was saying, "You can't like one." She couldn't stop laughing. I could hear Dave cackling in the background. David went to pick up the camera. It was an Asian proprietor. He said to Dave, "All okay, nothing lost," and started flicking through the photographs. When he came across the large arse shot, he said, "Oh, what that?" More laughed. Another 5 minutes before, "Yeah, what happened there?" Quick as a flash, Dave moved on to the next photo and just said, "That was a crapfish." It was a very rare species.
It's a red-backed, brown-eyed crayfish.
Yeah, it was. It took Ross about 20 minutes to tell me that over his phone. We had ourselves so much. Dick and I were both big Monty Python fans. one of our favourites was the search for the Holy Grail. in one scene from the movie, the English Crusaders arrived up at the French castle. They used to go along like this. They didn't have horses. The bloke at the back had the coconuts and making noise like that, which is very weird. The French, of course, were looking over the top, trying to English pigs and
Your mother swam after.
your mother swims after American battleships, and I unclog my nose at you. At the same time, they're tipping. Can I have some water?
Yes.
At the same time, they're tipping buckets of this brown stuff, which you don't remember. You don't have to imagine what it was over the running off their helmets. Thank you. I'm nearly finished. And one of the favourite taunts from was, I fart in your general direction. You've seen it mentioned. I fart in your general direction. That was a very appropriate to us, and we often use that in our conversations many times. When we visited Dave last December, we knew his situation was grim, but we were still able to have a few laughs with him. Good hour.
So it's your first day. 6.
Thank you. Thanks. The farewell was difficult, though knowing it was probably our last, words were impossible. We left in tears, just waving goodbye. He later sent a beautiful email to us saying how much he appreciated our visit, how much he loved us. And he signed off by saying, I fart in your general. And that's my parting words to you, Dick. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dennis. And I'm happy to say that we've managed to retrieve that photo, and you'll see it later today. So, and Dennis said he's willing to drop his DAX to compare if you're not convinced. So just so people filming this for YouTube go wide when we do that. Now we're lucky to have Bernie with us, who's going to sing a couple of songs. So I might just take us a minute or two to get ready here. But,
Except she's called Bern.
That's
right. There was an Artie Bernie, I'm not good.
The others will be known as Bernie.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Timmy. I didn't get the whole. Hi, I'm David's niece.
Sorry, I'll get over here.
That's all right. And while he's setting up the guitar, I actually need you to hold this because Roz asked me to sing this. The last time I did this was I can't remember, but 20 years ago. So I just need the chords.
What's it called?
That's what's
We've
all
all
right.
just hold
You just hold it, it's right. No, so Roz asked me to sing this. So I knew David all my life because I'm a niece. Yeah, he was there when I was born. So yeah, and my first memory of David was at Gran and Dar's place, and he was painting a wall, his bedroom wall, and it was in three-dimensional cubes in the lounge room. Okay, and I remember watching him paint it, and it was black and gold and cream, and I have a vivid memory that I don't even know how old I was. Probably 2, 3, something like that. Yeah. But I couldn't believe how amazing he was. Like, he was an incredible artist. And, yeah.
We're in tune.
Thank you. Yeah. There we go. Strange song to pick. I can't stand the rain against my window, bringing back sweet memories. Even though, hey, you remember how to be like me. Well,
was helping the strangers, and most of them were Roz's work colleagues. And I am in that too. I'm guilty. The last time I saw David, he picked up a chair from Aldi for me, and I got down and picked it up, so we're all guilty of it. Don't point fingers. But to start with, I'd like to bring Ray Lincoln forward, thank you, and then I'll say a few words on behalf of Wayne, and then we'll have Shannon say a few words. So, thank you.
So wow, what more can we say about David than Roz and everyone else that's spoken has already said? I think I'll Anyway, David was a quiet man and didn't mix with a lot of people. However, Wayne and I were two of the lucky ones. Usually our social outings were organised around me and my availability from work. However, today Rosie has a full rank and making me take a day off work. Happy to do it for you, David, though. We met Rosie in about 2008, which we're still debating on, where she joined Wayne and I and a few other lovely colleagues that are here today at the airport. Our first memory of David was the chili bread he used to make to get us through our shift. Rosie didn't like it, so he did only make it for us. It wasn't that long before Wayne and I started to socialise with David and Rosie for dinners. The Norman was a place that the four of us loved, and it became our regular get-together. Over the years, we started to invite others to join our dinner group. In particular, Shannon and Debbie, and there's a few others here as well. And then when Rosie left us the first time, retired, we expanded it to a lot more of our lovely colleagues who are here today. They adopted Shannon as a quasi-daughter, and she began to hang out regularly with us at the Norman, and then we started going out for breakfast. Wayne introduced us to the Asian cafes where we would either have brekkie or just meet for coffee. About 2015, Rosie, David and I went to see a Bee Gees tribute band at the Newman Hotel. And then in 2016 we enjoyed dinner at Ahmet in Southgate, which a number of you were at as well. 2017, David, Rosie, Wayne and I went to Legends Speakeasy Bar for a whiskey appreciation night. David loved his whiskey, so this was a great night, and we all experienced moonshine for the first time. In 2017, Rosie hatched this plan to organise a surprise 70th birthday party for her beloved David. A few of us were invited and had to keep it quiet every time we saw him to keep it secret. This was made more difficult by the fact that we organised to have coffee with David and Rosie 1 week before the party at one of Wayne's favourite Asian coffee places, Moby Cafe at Sunnybank of all places. Wayne was okay. He made up some plausible bullshit story that he would be in Sydney the next week. I finished the coffee by just saying, have a great birthday, and we departed. Then on the 19th of August 2017, we all just miraculously turned up at the South Sydney District Junior Rugby League Club at the same time on the same day. Probably with a lot of you that are here today. What are the odds? Well, wasn't David surprised? He was very emotional, but you could also tell that he was so happy to see so many family and friends. All he kept saying was that payback would be sweet. It was a lovely night, which I think David would have thought of often. The kids, Kate and Dan, were often visiting, and we were invited out to dinner with them when either or both were in town. For those that know us, you may not believe us, but we branched out from the Norman and had dinners at Thai Orchid. That's a big one for me, I hate food. And an Indian favourite of David's, which was curry pata at Panamera. Yeah. David loved his kids and thoroughly enjoyed his time with them when they visited. David was a lovely man. He would do anything for anybody, as everybody has said. So we all know of his love of animals, especially his rescue dogs. He loved his handyman stuff and loved going to Canberra to do things at Kate's place. We always used to hear about it. It was touching. Another of his loves was his check-ins at Bunnings. Rosie was not to be outdone by this, and her love of check-ins was naughty but nice. Not quite sure it was comparable, but that was Rosie's thing for her bus trips to the city. Those of you that are friends on Facebook will understand. We had our last dinner with David at the Norman here, 31st of August 2019. We tried to meet up again, but unfortunately David was just not up to it. He was courageous through his battle and was an inspiration to us all. Rosie, Kate and Dan, we stand with you in your time of grief and look forward to still catching up in memory of David. You were definitely one of the good guys. Ozzy was very lucky. Rest in peace, David. You'll be missed.
Alright, and this is on behalf of Wayne. I first met David about 10 years ago, working through his wife, Roz. My first impressions of the man was that he was a man of few words. During the following years, David and I bonded over some common interests such as coffee, whiskey and Indian food, the spicy stuff in particular. As you all know, David was quite the handyman and loved to tinker around his garage and make things. As you all would know, one of David's favourite places, as mentioned by Raylene, was Bunnings. It is my understanding the day after David passed away, the share price of Bunnings dropped about 20%, and they were making possible staff announcements about retrenchments. I'm just saying. I've also heard speculation that some of the Bunnings sausage sizzles, that they are rebelling and putting the onion back on top of the sausage, except for those troublemakers up in Gympie, who knows what they're doing up there. Over the last few years, David and Roz found an out-of-the-way Indian restaurant called Curry Pata, which is not all that far from their home. We went there many times to enjoy a great meal, and David and I would sometimes debate which one of us discovered the hot beef arachi. Well mate, now that you're not here to defend yourself, I'm claiming that one as my find. By the way, this is not a paid sponsorship, and I believe that from Raylene as well. The Curry Pata Indian restaurant is at 59 to 63 Drive, Tanamera, Queensland. Tell them Wayne sent you. I respected David's appreciation for the finest drink ever made. I'm talking about whiskey, of course. David knew that my absolute passion was Japanese whiskey. He introduced me to a couple of whiskies from Scotland that opened my mind to other possibilities in the world of whiskey. Even when we went to a whiskey appreciation night a few years ago at the Speakeasy in Brisbane, we were introduced to moonshine that night, which I think surprised us all. We had a couple of our own whiskey appreciation nights at House Brown at Shayla Park. Fortunately for me, the kind hosts offered me a bed for the night. We'd each provide a couple of bottles of whiskey and we'd share them over a few stories of good times, Mr. Brown. It is often said that you can judge a person by the way they treat animals. If this is the case, then David Brown was a giant of a man. I'd always admired the way he cared for his pets and the work he did with Roz adopting and caring for rescue dogs. I think what I remember most is that David is his love of animals and pets and his family. Families first, just so you know, I just got tripped up with the word. Rosie, you scored well on this one. Thank you. I'd now like to bring his quasi daughter Shannon up here, please, to say a few words.
David Oldboy Brown was the poster model of our state-loving crew, affectionately known as the Norman Nomads. When I first met David, he and Rosie welcomed me into the fold like the fun parents everyone wishes they had. Never short of a witty comment or a shot of Nature's Mark, Oldboy was quick to hang heaps about the onion bunning scandal on the only Gypsy person in the room. I survived. David was the epitome of a gentleman, but just don't be the idiot who orders a fish dish in his presence at a sacred Norman hotel steakhouse. I swear David's face said it all, that it was all over Red Rover. Nonetheless, Oldboy and Rosie stuck with their adopted wayward, and I could not be more grateful. To Rosie, Kate and Dan, it was a privilege to watch a husband, father and men like David show his love, care and pride for all of you and your achievements. To David, thank you for being one of the best mates and examples of a man a girl could have. This to you up there in Bunnings heaven. One day we'll share a hearty steak again, but maybe hold the onion this time.
Thank you. So there's no pressure. I'll now throw the mic open to if anyone wants to come up and say a few words. If not, then I'll just roll the video, but it's here. Please. I take no responsibility whatsoever.
I should have done big writing too. Good afternoon everyone, I'm Vicky and I'm very privileged to call David and Rosie my friends. Thank you Rosie, Kate and Dan for the opportunity to speak today about your beloved husband and devoted father David. I feel very honoured. Many of you who know the Browns are probably thinking, who's this person? Because apart from them and a few of their mates, I'm meeting this very colourful dinner to celebrate David's birthday after all. I don't know many others here. Our friendship only began about 15 months ago, but didn't find my treasure. I like to think that people come into your life for a reason, and I first met Rosie in person in December 2018, although we were already online buddies through the wonderful support group she established for Australians who had a partner with prostate cancer. We are both chatterboxes, so this common trait in our shared concern for our darling husbands and the consequences of their illness led to the beginning of a friendship for which I am most thankful. I think David may have thought we were a couple of nutbags though, especially after a certain road trip. He had a great sense of humour, luckily, because mine is rather wacky sometimes, and I know Rossie's definitely is. Rosie is a remarkable woman who genuinely cares for others, and her darling David was and always will be the most important person in her life. She cares for and advocates for him with utter devotion and selflessness. He loves you, Dan and Kate very dearly, Rosie, but you know that already. Between us, we decided that our two wonderful blokes should meet each other. They sounded a lot alike. Smart fellows whose favourite store was Bunnings, a common theme there. Big sheds full of every possible tool, handyman types who drove flat traders, homebodies, pragmatic, accepting and uncomplaining, always wearing a smile, and David's mother and Rob's mother-in-law were both hugged by Donald Moore. I think it's fair to say they therefore had the same political leanings. A dinner at a restaurant was planned, not always easy when you have a loved one with serious health issues as our man had, but we managed a wonderful night together, albeit with a few venue hiccups and an early trip home. Well, we were all tired by about 7:30 anyway. We laughed and had a great time together. David is a true gentleman. It was the first time we had met David, and on the way home we talked about what a lovely man he was. After all, my darling husband said, he's a union man, of course he'd be a good boy. My husband was too, obviously. There was an air of solidarity at the dinner table that evening in more ways than one. David also showed how caring and thoughtful he was. Ron was struggling, my husband was struggling with his mobility, and David's kindness towards him and me was touching, especially when he was not well himself. I know many of you here can attest to that wonderful trait of David, his kindness. Even during his last day in hospital, he was thinking of others, and I'm not surprised that the staff all loved him. He was a bit of a rascal too, I believe. In the short time I've known him, I witnessed his warm-heartedness many times. Rosie and I became firm friends, sharing what was happening with our dear men and supporting each other in our role as carers. David was always quietly in the background, passing on his regards, and courageously and without complaint dealing with awful disease. I don't want to dwell on that side of things or let it define who David is, but I can't escape the fact that it was what brought us together in a friendship. And like most things in life, the worst of times often brings out the best in people. Whenever I saw David, he was always incredibly welcoming, smiling, sneaking in a few subtle jokes and witty comments, and giving me an opportunity to join him in a usually political conversation, where we were always both in agreement and animatedly enjoyed, while Rosie was probably rolling her eyes in the background. I usually threw in a few swear words, but David did, being much more polite than me. Our eldest daughter was also privileged to meet David when Rosie invited us to their home for lunch, but mainly for my daughter Natalia to meet their beautiful big dogs, Ed and Franco. David adored and doted on his boys as they did him, and our dog-loving daughter had a fabulous time. David was so gracious, and Ed and Rosie did their best to stop their beautiful boys from knocking us flying. It was great fun. I learned a lot about the amazing and very special man that David is in the short time I knew him. A very skilled tradesman, an intelligent man who is remarkably clever with his hands, and a passionately fair person who believes everyone deserves to be treated equally. But above all, it is his quiet humility, his kindness and his complete and selfless love for his wife Rosie and their wonderful children Dan and Kate that is most impressive and inspiring. As someone he had not known for very long, he bestowed grace and friendliness towards me, and my life is richer for having met David. He was so empathetic and thoughtful when my dear husband passed away 7 months ago. Determined to attend the celebration of life for Ron, and the event we had in November, despite his own ill health. It was a huge effort for David that day, particularly as it was ridiculously hot. But he told Rosie he needed to be there to respect and honour Ron and show his support for me. Those selfless acts sum up the type of person David is, putting others ahead of himself. A gentle, caring, compassionate human being, in essence a very good man, whose presence will be greatly missed and whose example of how to live your life is one to which we should all aspire. Thank you, dear David, for being in my orbit. You made a difference to my life for which I am truly grateful. Rest in peace, my friend. I told you I'd look out for Rosie, and I will.
Thank you for those remarks, Vicky. Anyone else want to come up and say a few words?
Yeah, you got the loud side of things now, mate.
Okay.
I don't think it might be.
Alright, you're like Riley, no go.
I promised Rosie I won't talk about our night in Bangkok that I went out with Dave. I promise I won't talk about it. It's toys. And if anyone understands what a toy is, it's a lady boy. Dave didn't go near them. Okay, I'm just going to try and be brief. The fact is, Dave married into a very interesting family, and he got stuck with us. I was lucky enough to know Dave on 2 fronts. As a family member, and also as family by choice. Everyone's talking about how lovely Dave was. He's a fucking good martial artist. Everyone got that. So, excuse my language, a bit emotional. So I was very privileged, you know, and I think he's probably looking down on me now going, I know where you're going, Steve Newton. He also knows where you're going, and you're going. And he's probably laughing. Dave, whether he's in heaven, or whatever you believe in, or he's going to be reincarnated, like a Labrador, loyal, okay? We're all going to miss him dearly, but you know what? This is the way I look at it. I was privileged to meet the man, because a lot of bastards didn't get to meet him. So, all the best to everyone. Enjoy your 4th day, and from our nutty side of the family, we're going to miss him. Thank you.
Yeah, look, before I finish up, I want to say on a personal note, thank you to the Browns for affording me the opportunity to do this. It's not often you get to do this job and know someone that's, you know, the centre of attention today, so thank you for the opportunity to be part of today. There's a jar at the front here with Franco's sketch on it. There's no pressure, but if anyone wants to drop a few coins in, what we're going to do is on Monday make a donation to Precious Cause. Yeah. In David's name, with David and Franco, so that's where Franco comes from. Feel free to come up and drop a few coins in. There'll be some snacks and some drinks going around after the video finishes. Feel free to hang around, give your respects to the Browns, have some drinks, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. Appreciate it.